Number 10, monkey head transplant. Okay, right off the top, here we go, pun intended. The first ever successful monkey head transplant was back in the early 1970s. I imagine some of your parents may have heard about this. It's probably pretty hard to forget. Maybe ask them about it tonight while they're mid-bite at dinner. American researcher Robert White pulled off the otherwise impossible in a slow, tedious operation. White took the head of one monkey and then attached it to a headless monkey. Yeah, add a little time and energy and voila, this actually worked. Yeah, believe it or not, the monkey actually tried to bite one of the surgeons once it came to, which, I mean, totally fair. I'd be a little pissed off too if I just had a different body all of a sudden. Sadly, the monkey passed away 9 days later, which is much further than I ever thought. But the fact that this actually happened is 1, terrifying, and 2, dare I say, miraculous. This is some sci-fi stuff right here. And here you go, new head, enjoy. Number 9, monkey become human. Okay, this next test here is a little less hands-on, so if you have some food, you could probably take a bite during this one. It's safe. Back in 1931, psychologist Winthrop Kellogg, familiar name, he was curious. Yeah, he sat up one night out of the blue and thought, what would happen if a monkey was raised with humans? Yeah, would it end up like that monkey from MVP, Most Valuable Primate? Would it learn to play hockey for the local team? Or would it learn how to do kickflips with Tony Hawk? No, none of that happened. Surprise, surprise. Kellogg brought a baby female chimp named Gua into his home, and this man raised a chimp as if it were another human being alongside his own son, human son, Donald. Yeah, they played, they laughed, they did everything together, but the test ended abruptly after Kellogg's son, Donald, started to make chimp noises. Yeah, and then everyone was like, you know what? I'm good, let's cancel this. Maybe chimps can't learn how to heel flip. We're done, let's go home. So Gua was then released. There we go. No more human best friend, you know? Back to normal, dare I say, normal? Number 8, feel the music. Okay, this next one here is a little fun, and we're on a part 3, and I have to talk about it. I just have to talk about it. There are many odd experiments in history where humans should have left, you know, human elements out, like music and illicit substances. I can't say what I want to say, but it's white, it's fluffy. It's a bad substance that's white and fluffy. There you go, that's all I'll say. YouTube's like, what is he saying? I can't figure it out. There you go, only you and I know. We're too smart for the algorithm. Well, back in 2011, a study was done where rats, just a bunch of rats, were all put in a room and on loop, they played a Miles Davis song. So they were all on said illicit substance, right? That stuff, and they were in a room while Miles Davis played all day long. Just smooth jazz all day. I'm not laughing because like it's funny, it's the weirdest thing. Imagine walking into this room by accident, you're like, what's going on in here? Oh my god, everyone's all hopped up. Well, before the substances were injected into the test subjects, they all seemed to have calm demeanors while Beethoven played on loop. But after injected, all the rats were neurologically triggered to that smooth jazz. Yeah, after 1 week on the sauce, the rats were all of a sudden like, you know what? Miles Davis kind of slaps. Been sleeping on Miles Davis this whole time. They're all like, yeah, Miles Davis, really good, so good. Horrible animal research and taxpayers' money. Yeah, we love dark history here on Most Amazing Top 10. Number 7, the first pregnancy test. If you're looking past the ancient Egyptian times and their use of barley and urine to determine if somebody is pregnant, you'll often land on this experiment from the 1930s. Now, it was developed in 1931 by Dr. Maurice Friedman at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. Now, what would happen is doctors would inject a rabbit with urine from a woman who was suspected of being pregnant, and the rabbit's ovaries could easily tell if that was the case. Accurate test? Yeah. Historical? Of course, it changed the game. Would it also end up with the rabbits passing away? Sadly, also a third yes. It's sad, but more often than not, when humans are involved with any medical process, the test subject dies. You know, before having its head transferred to another animal or something, you're like, what the f is happening here? Number 6, small brain and big brain. This next one here, I mean, again, we're on a part 3. We're getting into some f***ed up stuff. Here we go. In the early 19th century, humans were figuring out a lot of firsts, you know, especially German researcher Carl August Weinhold. He was on the quest to prove to all that the brain and its nervous system were both attached by wires. Yeah, in order to do so, he took brains and spinal cords of deceased cats, and he filled the cavities inside with zinc and silver batteries. And like we know now, the obvious happened. The bodies began to reanimate as if they were alive again. Huh, it's like it's black magic. Or batteries, probably batteries. It's definitely the batteries. This was the first time this type of test was done, and now we use electricity and silver for other ways, of course. But thanks to this curious doctor, the early 19th century saw some early Bill Nye the Gross Science Guy stuff. Again, imagine walking into this room by accident. Like, oh, what's going on in here now? Number 5, the multi-dog. Ah, nice, I love dogs. Let's get a bunch for the price of none. Back in the 50s, when a Soviet scientist, Vladimir Demikov, created a multi-dog, Time magazine had to cover it. Of course, this is a feat in science. As cruel as it sounds, of course, the adult dog had a newborn grafted to its neck. It's impressive, but also you're like, ew, my God, Jesus. So when it grew, it could survive off the blood of the main, bigger dog. The body, for lack of a better term, gross. When observed, the puppy did have its own characteristics, which was the craziest point here. Some say it was playful with its growls, just as the other dog's characteristics would be. It's a sad 1950s Soviet animal experiment, so of course the animal didn't survive for a long time. It just, all of a sudden it was on something's neck and then it was in the next life. That's horrible. Number 4, the great razor auk. Once thriving in colonies off North Atlantic coast, the great auk would grow to 30 inches long and its wings would only be used to swim. They were little cute tiny boys. They were cute but quite defenseless, obviously, since they're not here anymore. Around the 1500s, European fishermen discovered this perfect area for hunting, and it just happened to be where most of these great auks were all living. Yeah, Newfoundland. Go get screeched in and then take out 1,000 auks. There we go. It was packed, so they rapidly declined. And by 1950, the last 2 known specimens were hunted by a single fisherman on LD Island. What a But now, scientists plan on using genetic information extracted from their fossils or preserved organs, people how they have, birds in jars and stuff like that. They plan on editing their DNA into the closest living species, which is now the razor-billed auk. So yeah, the organization Revive and Restore may bring these birds back to life. So cute flappy wings may just return. Remember that game Flappy Wings? Disappeared from the App Store so quick. Disappeared faster than number 3, the dodo bird. Dodo birds were once big and beautiful. These flightless ground nesting birds once filled islands all over the Indian Ocean. They had massive talons, they were gray and blue, they didn't have any natural predator until, we came along. Sorry, we got hungry. Around 1507, the island was discovered by Portuguese sailors and the rest is history. They were the easiest bird to hunt, hence the phrase, dead as a dodo. That's where it comes from. They weren't just loved by sailors either. No, monkeys, rats, pigs, any animal that made its way to the island easily had their eggs for lunch. And reminder, they were big eggs. So it didn't take a long time for the dodo bird population to be completely wiped out. The last dodo was hunted in 1681. Again, imagine being that guy. What a dick. But could it be? Could we bring the dodo back to life with science? Yes, apparently. This could be a real thing. Scientists found an extremely well-preserved dodo skeleton back in 2007, so we may have a chance at picking some DNA apart. A research facility near Melbourne, Australia is currently trying to use pigeon genes, and we're gonna see them in the sky. I mean, I'm all for the idea of bringing back, animals and stuff. Scientifically, that's a wonderful feat, but do we really think no one's gonna make dodo bird chicken wings? I'm gonna get that on Uber Eats in a year. I can just smell it. Number 2, the gastric brooding frog. Crossbreeding and gastric brooding. Nice, we're getting close to the end, it seems. I'm a big fan of frogs, and the gastric brooding frog is particularly interesting to me and also scientists due to their birthing process. If you're eating something, now would be a good time to hit that thumbs up, maybe take a break, put that food to the side for a bit. See, these frogs back, and when they were alive, they would swallow their eggs and then they would hatch them later out of their mouths. Pretty horrible if you watch that in time lapse, I bet. They're fascinating creatures. And with the Lazarus Project, scientists are actually trying to bring back the Australian gastric brooding frog from extinction. So we might see this horrible act in person. You might go to catch a frog and then all of a sudden it'll be like, wah, and there's a baby will come out of it and you'll be like, all right, I'm all set actually, how about that? They went extinct back in 1983, but scientists have figured out how to implant dead cells into a fresh egg from an entirely different frog species. Amphibians are declining worldwide, so if we can get these guys back out of extinction, it would be 1 point for Gryffindor. We'd be looking a lot better, that's all I'm saying. And finally, number 1, Martha. Look, I like to keep it light, so I have to end with my girl Martha. The passenger pigeon once flocked over the skies of Canada. This was the 19th century, and it looked a lot different. Billions of these bright orange birds would just paint the skies, and rumor has it, they would fly in flocks so large that it would block the sun out for a short amount of time. Wow. Hashtag flocks that block. We love it. But only a few decades passed and the passenger pigeon, they're gone. Just like that, they're no more. So what exactly happened? Well, the very last passenger pigeon, her name was Martha. She sadly passed away in the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. So we took a look at her DNA to see if Martha held any secrets to her past and their extinction, and we found a couple. They discovered Martha had a low genetic diversity for such a growing population. Natural selection and hunting eliminated the nicest looking pigeon, arguably. The last one died in 1914, but but in 2019, paleontologists found remains of the pigeon in protected indigenous lands in the Northwest Territories. So now they blended passenger pigeon DNA with dinosaur DNA, so that's always exciting. We've seen a few movies on how that can go wrong. We're bringing back pigeons with a touch of dinosaur. I'll say it again, on one hand, I'm glad science is allowing us to, you know, try again, have another go, but look at the pigeons we have now. Those pigeons are hardcore. These things will walk onto the subway with you. Pigeons today will ask you for change. They're ruthless. They're covered in mustard. It's not the same. These graceful birds from the 1910s, I feel like we're bringing back Captain America. You know what I mean? I don't think these old school chaps will appreciate the new game of pigeons. They're a little dirty. I don't know. I don't think they're ready, and I don't think we are either. Kicking off the list at number 10, Stubbins Firth. Okay, this is one of the craziest science projects I've ever heard of in my entire life. Ugh, so gross. Stubbins Firth, a researcher from Pennsylvania in the late 1700s. First of all, as you can probably guess, the 1700s. Methods back then, they got a little messy from time to time, sure. A lot of firsts in the medical science world back then. Firth was a doctor in training at the time, and he decided to prove to the world that yellow fever was not contagious. Yeah, imagine if you had Twitter. Firth would surgically insert vomit from patients with yellow fever into his own body. He would like put it in wounds all over his face, his eyes. He was trying to get it. He was going the extra mile, all in the name of medical research. Thanks, Firth. So gross. Even urine and saliva, anything DNA-wise, anything gross, just pour it in. That's it, all over. Firth, to our surprise, did not get sick. Yeah, he was proud of that one too. He told everybody this new revelation. We look back now though and realize Firth just sampled late-stage patients this entire time. So they were further along, much further than the contagious period. Yeah, no one really knew. So basically, he volunteered to dump all over his Yeah, history is so gross. Science as well. Gets nasty. Number 9, Robert Liston. In the early 19th century, crowds would gather. They would gather to watch Dr. Robert Liston work. Yeah, he was known as the fastest knife in the West. I know, how many red flags can you find already in this one? A crowd, a fast surgery, what? What's going on? This was a time before anesthesia had been developed, so you wanted things wrapped up quickly, pun intended. He would have you amputated and sutured in 3 minutes or less. Nice. 1 in 10 would pass away, but this was a time where those were good odds, until it wasn't. Robert attempted to beat any record previously held that during a surgery, he accidentally cut off his assistant's fingers by accident, as well as the, patient's leg. But wait, it gets worse. Yeah, when he was swinging away, he also accidentally hit somebody else watching. Remember how I said crowds would gather, the old surgery crowd? Yeah, this is why you don't stand close. It's kind of like crump battles, you know? You can't get too close. Disaster's waiting in there. You don't want to get smoked with a timberland. I'm glad surgeons are taking their time now. I'm also glad no surgeons are trying new experiments at a record time. That's also nice too. Number 8, the monster study. Speech pathologists, I have admiration for your profession. You all are amazing. You're literally miracle workers. Back in 1939, speech pathologists at the University of Iowa were determined to crack the secret behind stuttering. Yeah, they believed that it all began with young adults and their fear of public speaking. So these researchers decided to just intimidate people and try and induce stuttering. Like, oh no, don't do, like why? They got patients who were showing signs of stuttering and they verbally attacked them. They kept telling them that they shouldn't speak unless they're sure they can do so properly on the first shot. I'd be like, no, get lost. That's confident, no. The experiment did not induce stuttering, it just induced anxiety and aggression and anger and confusion. 3 of these patients later sued Iowa and the university for $925,000. Number 7, Jose Delgado. Okay, we're talking mind control now, so I'll give you a moment to put on your tinfoil hat. In the early 1900s, Jose Delgado graduated from the University of Madrid. He even lands a professorship at Yale University. Guy's killing it, but his mind was focused on others' minds. He was committed to mind control. His go-to method was these implants, like electrode implants with wires. He first used it with primates, as you could have guessed, horrible classic. He would use a remote control to make them do certain moves, even moving on to mind controlling a bull. Yeah, he got in the ring with said mind controlled bull, but then oddly enough, the bull was calm. Weird. Almost like there's an implant in his brain and he's confused and doesn't want anything to do with that. Huh, how did he do it? Genius. Reports say that he stopped the bull last second before it charged at him. I say there's a thing in his head and he wasn't sure what was up. That's my vote. Poor thing. And then next, as you could have guessed, came the people. 25 people were tested with this mind control device by electronically controlling the brain. He believes armies could be controlled down the road. And until his death in 2011, he was upset. Yeah, he was upset he wasn't cited as often in terms of mind control projects in recent studies. Like, guy who mind control animals in the 1900s. Yeah, we're trying not to do that anymore. Maybe. Thanks. Number 6. Ilya Ivanov. In the late 1800s, another old weird experiment with animals was underway. Here we go. Soviet biologists, they actually got permission from the country to breed hybrid ape humans. Yep, what did you get up to last summer? Oh, let me tell you, my friends. Horrible. Who does this? This is crazy. Who thinks of this? They grafted an ovary into a chimp and the goal was to fertilize Nora, the chimp, with human DNA. Nightmare. So they inseminated a group of chimps. None of them got pregnant, obviously, so instead they tried to flip the project around. This time they had a human inseminated with the DNA of chimps. The volunteer number was obviously low. Luckily, nothing actually happened. This would have been an absolute train wreck. Before the project went underway, he was sent to Kazakhstan, and he thankfully didn't go up to any more science projects at that point. No mixed in DNAs, nothing's going around. We're good. We dodged that bullet, but we got close. Number 5, William Buckland. Late 1700s, contemporary of Charles Darwin himself. Yeah, William Buckland, historically, he made some Jurassic waves. He was the first man to write a description of a fossilized dinosaur. He's into weird stuff, I guess. He's unfortunately also known for weird stuff more than, the dino discovery stuff. William Buckland would eat some strange dishes, all in the name of, science and discovering new things with DNA. They were bored, I guess. He roasted hedgehogs, ostriches, panthers, bats, he ate everything. Like, I get it was the late 1700s, but eating these animals as often as he did, plus his brains, now we gotta ask some questions. What's going on? What's the end game here, my guy? One of the most bizarre things that he studied up close and personal was the heart of King Louis XIV. Yeah, the way these scientists would handle tasks like old school testing, not ideal. Actually quite gross. Number 4, Francis Crick. Here we go. Before we get really, really dark here with the science and health studies and stuff, we need to mention aliens. You heard me. Tinfoil's on already. We're good. In the early 1900s, Francis Crick, the guy who discovered DNA alongside James Watson, two brilliant minds, dare I say life-changing discoveries, they also believed in directed transpermia, meaning that humans were put on this planet by aliens. Yeah, like extraterrestrials, like actual, aliens, like another species planted us here on purpose, like a science project. Yeah, scientists believe that they are a science project. Some of his methods, conversations to patients, were obviously quite sketchy with these beliefs in order. Hey, let's talk about DNA. I'm brilliant. Also, did you know aliens left you here? Great, have a great day. Here's your bill. It's a lot of money. It's really old. Number 3, John Bodkin Adams. He was once a general practitioner in the British community in Essex, and most of his patients were unfortunately elderly. And he treated said elderly patients with care. Now, there's obviously more. It gets dark. From 1946 to 1956, John had around 160 patients that all suspiciously died, and out of those 160, 132 of them just happened to leave valuables over for him. Yeah, he ended up dying a very rich man. What are the odds? Must have been some great care he was providing, eh? Not fishy at all. Of course, the wills were later found out to be fraudulent because, well, as per this list, it was the worst of the worst. And the worst part of all this, John was acquitted after everything. Yeah, his trial established that the doctrine of double effect, which is where a doctor giving treatment with the aim of relieving pain, may lawfully, as an unintentional result, shorten their life. So they're like, oh, it sometimes happens, so we can't punish him. Yeah, no, look at the numbers here. So out of the dozens of cases that ended horribly, Adams was only charged for 2. And he wasn't even convicted of their deaths even. He was just guilty of forging prescriptions and falsifying medical forms. He even reopened his practice. Yeah, although he was fined. He was fined only £2,000. The general public knew he had taken the lives of at least 8 people, so he didn't do much after that. But like I said, he ended up passing away rich at the age of 84. Number 2, Morris Bulber. He was once part of the Philadelphia poison ring, which, yep, already you're like, oh, number 2, we're already here. Here we go. Yeah, that was a real thing. How horrible does that sound? The Philadelphia poison ring. Okay, it was led by these 2 Italian cousins. It was led by Paul and Herman Petrillo. This was back in the 1930s. And these 2 brothers, these 2 bros, they were perfect for each other in a horrible, dark, disgusting way. Harold was the arson who knew how to make counterfeit money, and Paul ran an insurance scam out of the back of his tailor business. So already this awful duo exists, and then in comes Morris Bulber, this Jewish Russian immigrant who believed in something called La Fatura, this magical practice that Italians from South Philadelphia believed in at the time. So bad, and then in comes crazy science, medical magic, just to make it better. Yeah, just add some spirit fingers into this horribleness. So Dr. Bulber would come in and give potions to patients, specifically patients from these cousins that they issued insurance policies from without medical exams. So they got this Dr. Bulber to then poison them with arsenic. The reason they had this scheme was because their insurance policies paid out the gang rather than the now widowed wives. How sad is that? This kicked off around 1931 and roughly 50 people bit the bullet before he was thankfully arrested in 1939. And yes, he turned the evidence over so those 2 cousins were also equally found guilty. Yeah, everyone's sentenced to death here. And finally, number 1, Dr. Satan. There's a fun little nickname, Dr. Satan. Yeah, let's talk about this guy. Marcel Petiot. It all started when he was young, as most of these do. He would get expelled from school, he had trouble with other students, and his first adult crime, was mail fraud. Reminder, this was the early 1900s. Marcel was actually found to be mentally unfit to stand on trial after he was arrested, so later he joined the army. Yeah, that's the real sentence. That's the order that things happen in. The army later discharged him after he was caught stealing blankets, and come 1921 he decided to get a degree. Yeah, he began practicing in France, and at the same time in 1926 he became the mayor. Yeah, we have a medical doctor and mayor all at the same time in the early 1900s. This sounds like a Tim Burton movie already. I'm already nervous. The guy loses his spot as a mayor because he stole power from the city. Yeah, he stole power from the city, like a real villain, right? And in 1933 his crimes became historically horrible. YouTube doesn't like us talking about Hitler and the Yazis, but we'll rhyme them, you know, we'll outrhyme the algorithm. This is history, we gotta talk about it. Marcel would talk to Jewish residents while World War II was unfolding, and he would lie. He would say that he's gonna assist them by injecting them with what he said was medicine, but after they'd passed away he would steal all their belongings and dispose of their bodies in the basement. It's horrible. It's perhaps one of the worst things I've ever heard of. Come 1943 he was thankfully arrested, and after the liberation of Paris he was found guilty for killing over 60 people. And in 1946 he finally met his fate via the guillotine.
In our number 10 spot we have Johann Conrad Dippel. Dippel was a scientist that is known for creating the elixir of life, an elixir that, yes, would keep you living for as long as you would like. It was called Dippel's oil. He tried to trade the elixir for Frankenstein's castle once. Obviously the owners didn't fall for it, or at least they didn't believe in its worth. But I bet you're wondering, why was he thought to be so evil? Well, probably because he used to experiment on himself and dead bodies. And he claimed that he even transferred the soul of one body to another, even though no one could ever confirm this as the bodies were, well, deceased. He also claimed to have a way of releasing demons from bodies. Man, I wonder if that's documented anywhere. We can all use an exercise for releasing demons, you know what I mean? In our number 9 spot we have Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons is known for being a rocket scientist, but also a follower of the occultist Aleister Crowley. He is believed to be someone who was in direct contact with the devil and did experiments, aka spells, on himself. He was the reason for the advancement of liquid fuel and solid fuel rockets. He was unable to continue being a scientist when news of his occult ways became public knowledge. Apparently he worked with the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, to summon the god Babylon to Earth. He died in an at-home explosion from an experiment that he was doing. Jack is a tricky one because obviously everyone was so Christian and Catholic back then that they would have thought him to be evil, but I don't know, I really wonder if this is one of those cases where, you know, they were wrong and maybe he was just a nice guy. I don't know. In our number 8 spot we have the Tuskegee scientists. The scientists that participated in this experiment are legit pure evil. There was a study done called the Tuskegee study where 600 African American males, 399 who were suffering with syphilis and 201 who weren't, and these men were being tricked into thinking that they were being treated for the illness, when really they were dying off, except the ones that didn't have it, of course. They were the success stories, of course. But what was the purpose of this? Well, to study their corpses. They couldn't have thought to just ask them if they could study their bodies once they die. Why did this happen, and even for as long as it did, which was 40 years, from 1932 to 1972. So evil. Reparations were eventually paid to the victims of the study, but nothing could make up for the horrible feeling they must have felt from going through that experience. In our number 7 spot we have Dr. Sigmund Rascher. This is a scientist that needed to be mentioned because of how evil he was. However, it is unclear as to whether he experimented on himself at all throughout his life. Rascher is considered one of the most evil scientists in the world from World War II. He worked at a camp and apparently experimented on 300 unwilling people in high-altitude freezing experiments. Victims were locked in a pressure chamber where the altitude was being continuously adjusted, and they would feel as if they were falling out of a plane. He would also place them in freezing environments naked to perform tests. Of course, this led to too many deaths. He was asked to do this on monkeys but demanded humans. Clearly a very sick and awful man. In our number 6 spot we have Shiro Ishii. There is a man that is known as Surgeon General Shiro Ishii, and he was a scientist and medical officer for the Japanese Imperial Army. In fact, he led the biological warfare unit that is known as 731. He's also known for being just plain evil, as he would experiment on Chinese prisoners and regular civilians. He used biological weapons that is said to have caused tens of thousands of deaths, including the bubonic plague, cholera, and anthrax. He would also conduct other evil experiments on his patients, including forced and simulated hypothermia. It is unclear if he experimented on himself, as I'm sure he wouldn't have given himself the bubonic plague, but it is clear that he was very, very evil. In our number 5 spot we have Max Joseph von Pettenkofer. Max was a scientist that wasn't so much evil as he was seemingly insane, as he did an extremely risky experiment on himself. Apparently in 1892 he wanted to disprove the theory that cholera bacteria alone was the cause of the disease. In the presence of witnesses, Max swallowed some broth with a large dose of cholera bacteria. He apparently also consumed some sodium bicarbonate to neutralize the acids in his stomach after it was suggested that the acid could kill the bacteria. Apparently he suffered only minor symptoms, and what he did experience, he says, wasn't due to the bacteria. To me, he just sounds like he was either a little insane or just so sure of himself that it wasn't a risk at all. And even then, I would say to be that sure of yourself, to take that big of a risk, means you have to be a little insane. In our number 4 spot we have Klauberg, another man who is known to be one of the most evil scientists in the world. Klauberg was a scientist in World War II that started off experimenting on himself, but then eventually switched to experimenting on a large amount of women in camps. And what was his purpose? Oh, to sterilize them all. He apparently experimented on hundreds, injecting formaldehyde into their stomachs without any painkillers, as well as it is said that he also injected animal sperm into some of the women to see if he could create an animal-human hybrid. Absolutely horrifying. In our number 3 spot we have Joseph Mengele, another German scientist from World War II that was said to have had evil intentions. He weirdly had an interest in young humans and twins, and a lot of his experimentation was around them. The most disturbing thing about him was his ability to seem so kind and charming and have everyone like him, but then in the next moment he would be the reason a bunch of people were sentenced to death. A true psychopath, and it's the seemingly kind ones that always leave you with shivers. He has a nickname and is known as the Angel of Death. In our number 2 spot we have Peter Neubauer. In the 60s and 70s, a secret experiment was done, led by a scientist by the name of Peter Neubauer, that separated twins and triplets from each other, and they were adopted as singles. Apparently this experiment was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and the purpose of this experiment is still unclear. To separate living humans from their family, all for the sake of science, is truly just evil in my opinion. The experiment was discovered in the 80s after 3 identical brothers accidentally found each other. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like to be them. I suppose this experiment isn't as horrible as some of the other ones we have listed today, but it still is terribly sad to think about all of these people, missing out on growing up with their brothers and sisters. It is unclear whether Peter's decision to lead this was part of his job and therefore through slight force, as it was being funded by a big organization, or whether he pushed for this to be done. In our number 1 spot we have Vladimir Demikov. So this is, in my personal opinion, one of the most evil scientists, but honestly there's so many evil ones on this list that it's really hard to say who should take first. So I'm giving it to Vladimir Demikov. Vladimir is a Soviet scientist that is known for performing the evil act of beheading many dogs and then re-sewing them onto other dogs' bodies. He did this for 15 years. Why? Oh, because apparently he was bored. Apparently, he was known to experiment on himself, and also he pioneered organ transplants, which is just so hard to digest that he could have been the founder of something that has done so much good for the world, while on the other hand, he committed unthinkable evil acts. Life is so strange. In our number 10 spot, we have Vladimir Demikov. Vladimir is a scientist from the Soviet Union that tried to create a two-headed dog. Not making this up. Not in the regular crossbreeding way that you may assume. He literally amputated the body of one of the dogs and attached it to the other. This honestly makes me sick to talk about. The dogs only lasted 4 days before passing away, and guess what? He did it again. He did it again. The next experiment ended up with 2 dogs living for about a month. But guess what? He literally had no purpose for these experiments. Just the ego satisfaction of being able to say that he did it. Well, thankfully he didn't, because he doesn't deserve any satisfaction or praise. Just gross. In our number 9 spot, we have Paracelsus. Paracelsus is known for being a Swiss physician, scientist, and alchemist in the 1500s during the Renaissance. He didn't necessarily experiment with crossbreeding humans with animals, but he did experiment with making humans tiny and ginormous. Also, he was seemingly evil / insane, so I just wanted to put him on this list. Paracelsus was convinced he could grow giants and tiny humans by growing them from a jar of Yep. Apparently he would keep the jar in a warm place and feed the creatures blood to make them grow. I can just see him sprinkling in some blood into that jar. Apparently he was quite successful and managed to grow tiny humans, but allegedly the small creatures turned on him and ran away. Naturally. They were said to be a foot high. In our number 8 spot, we have Irving Wiseman. Irving Wiseman was working at Stanford University as a researcher when he was given permission to inject a mouse with human brain cells. They just wanted to see what would happen. They were instructed to stop the experiment once the human-like behaviors got to a specific point, like improved memory or problem solving, because then they'll have a pinky in the brain sitch, and the concept of that only sounds good in the cartoon world. I'm not ready for a mouse world takeover anytime soon. In our number 7 spot, we have Gordon Gallup and his team of scientists. Okay, so not saying Gordon Gallup is the evil scientist, but more that all of the scientists that consented to do this in the first place may have been operating from an evil frequency. Or perhaps they were just doing what they were told because it's their job, because let's be real, the real powerful people that make the decisions are the ones funding such projects as these. But since I have no idea who funded this, as that would probably take too much digging that I don't have time for, and it will probably just lead us to the US government, we're going to just call this spot Gordon Gallup and his team of scientists. Gordon Gallup was once one of the leading experts in evolutionary psychology, and he worked with a team of scientists in the 1920s on interbreeding humans with chimpanzees. He leaked to the press that they were actually successful. The experiment was conducted at the Orange Park Laboratory in Florida. Everyone proceeds to Google the financial backers there. This is where a female chimpanzee was inseminated with human. The animal not only became pregnant, but then proceeded to give birth to a living being, a human Z. But get this, they did not allow the human Z to live. After all of that, it was euthanized. What the heck, man? Potentially harmed this animal by impregnating it only to kill its baby cub. My inner future mama bear is poking through, and I don't like this. In our number 6 spot, we have another group of scientists, the Belgian scientists. It really is so hard to name just one scientist responsible, because it really does take a village to raise a child, and in this case, to create a mutant cow. Yes, a team of Belgian scientists started back in the 1800s to breed native cattle with short-horn cattle, and over time they only selected the biggest and strongest, and eventually that led them to creating the Belgian super cow. A ginormous cow that literally looks like it's on steroids, and I'm kinda afraid of it. I'm very afraid of it. It is unclear why these experiments were being done. I can only assume for more meat. So I guess we can't call these scientists evil per se without a justified reason, but hopefully they have a good one, because otherwise, leave those cows alone. In our number 5 spot, we have Juan Carlos Belmonte. Juan is a biologist at the Salk Institute in California that has been working with other scientists and researchers in China on creating a human-animal chimera. Basically, a monkey embryo will be given human cells to create this. Now, before you get upset and say, "What for?" I think this may arguably be the best reason for doing this kind of experiment. The reason this is being done is to see if animals can possess organs such as livers and kidneys that are entirely human and can be used in the future as organs for transplants. As we do have a transplant shortage around the world, coming up with a solution to this is vital. Apparently, every 10 minutes a new person is added to the waiting list for an organ transplant. So at this point, it is unclear as to whether the experiment has been completely successful, but I'm sure we'll know in the upcoming years. In our number 4 spot, we have Dr. Karl Klauberg. This guy is truly very evil. He was a doctor that would work in the infamous monstrous camps that I cannot name due to YouTube violation reasons, so please catch my drift. The monstrous camps during World War II, specifically the Poland camp. Apparently, originally he was interested in sterilizing all of the women of the camp, and eventually his interests expanded. He was allowed to experiment on thousands, but only 700 survived. He also artificially inseminated prisoners through a variety of methods and tormented his victims by claiming to have injected animal sperm into their womb to create a monster. There are no reports that confirm this to be 100% true, as well as there are no reports of the after effects of this, so we have to conclude that this horrible, unconsented experiment was thankfully a failure. Just pure evil. In our number 3 spot, we have Hiromitsu Nagauchi. Hiromitsu is a scientist from Japan that is leading a team at the University of Tokyo. He and his team plans to grow human cells in mice and rat embryos and then transport them into surrogate animals, similar to work being done at Stanford University in the US. The goal is yet again to continue to see if animals can produce human organs that can later be transplants for humans. Up until recently, Japan was very strict as to how long the human cells in the embryos were allowed to be kept alive till, but recently the laws changed and they're allowed to be kept until the animal is brought to term. Whoa. This will help so much in terms of what they will be able to find through studying this process, but of course there are many ethical concerns around this experiment, such as once this new animal is brought to term, then won't it be a baby? Some claim that this is pure evil to then destroy this baby after, but gosh, I wonder if the decision maker of these experiments struggle with this, because I definitely would. In our number 2 spot, we have an unknown evil scientist that created the human sheep. In 2017, villagers of a small town in South Africa were frightened when a local sheep gave birth to a human sheep crossbreed. This is truly terrifying stuff that will haunt your dreams. Like, terrifying. It will definitely haunt mine. Imagine human sheep wandering the world. No thanks. Clearly this experiment was done by some evil scientist that decided, heck, I'm going to just let this happen and see how it unfolds. No one knows exactly how it was done, but most think the sheep was just artificially inseminated. The baby born was a stillborn, but if it had made it out alive, I bet you the world would have been on the hunt for the person responsible. In our number 1 spot, we have Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov. Known from his title, The Red Frankenstein, who was said to have been the creator of artificial insemination. His interest eventually turned into being interested in crossbreeding. In the 1920s, he traveled to Africa. After already successfully crossbreeding a zebra and a donkey, he now wanted to crossbreed a human and an ape. Apparently, after a while of living in Africa, he became desperate as his funds became increasingly low, that he then began to inseminate African women with chimpanzees without their knowledge. Holy, that's disgusting. Eventually, when people found out about what he was doing, he was shut down and his name was forever tarnished. And yeah, I'm glad, because that's horrible.
Starting off our list at number 10, new bees. Great. Sick of the old ones that sting you in the neck and then you're allergic? We got some new bees now to worry about. Here we go. A lot of us know bees are pretty harmless and kind of cute, hairy little pollinators. Unless, of course, like I mentioned, you're allergic or terrified of them. But truthfully, bees normally do a lot more good than harm, obviously, right? Save the bees. That was, of course, until an experiment in the 70s went south. Yeah, this experiment resulted in a new bee, just a dangerous bee. The idea was to take a regular honeybee and breed it with a bee that is found in Africa that produces more honey. And of course the goal was to produce a manageable bee that would also be able to provide more honey than a regular honeybee. Good stuff, right? On paper this sounds like a step in the right direction. Well, the bees that came out were a lot less manageable and they didn't even make more honey. Yeah, liars. You're fired, all 1,000 of you. Get out of here. After this experiment ended, however, the bees got out into the environment, and in the 80s we saw the beginning of a massive trouble. These bees are not only aggressive towards other kind of bees, which creates a huge problem, but they're also very aggressive towards human beings. Nice. And when these guys sting, their stinger stays with them, so they can, continue to Julius Caesar you how many times they want. Victims of these swarms receive 10 times the amount of stings as regular swarms, so horrible, horrible news. And they react to disturbances 10 times faster, and they will also chase said disturbance a quarter of a mile. So hope you can run really fast and really far. Number 9, wholphin. These guys were created when a female common bottlenose dolphin was bred with a male false killer whale. Yeah, we shouldn't be doing this. They're extremely rare and they have been found in the wild, but unfortunately most of the ones that have existed were bred in captivity. Because humans are the worst. The first recorded wholphin was born in the Tokyo SeaWorld in 1981, and he very sadly died just 200 days later. Didn't even make it 1 year. Horrible. Probably a prime example of why they maybe shouldn't exist in the first place. I don't know, just a wild observation. The first that was born in the United States that actually somehow survived was at Sea Life Park in Hawaii in May 1985, and her name was Kekamalu. She ended up having 3 babies. The first passed away after a few days, the second passed away at the age of 9, but thankfully the third one is still alive. In March last year, both Kekamalu and her daughter were still alive, but they remain, of course, in captivity, so it's like, great. But not, really not at the same time. Number 8, farm cattle. Back in the 90s, farmers in India were told that if they crossbred their cattle, they'd be able to breed cattle that could produce more milk, which in turn would mean more money for them and their families. Awesome, this should be amazing and great news, right? Well, considering why we're here watching, I don't think it's gonna end the way we think now. Different breeds of bulls were brought in and farmers were expecting great results, but they ended up being stuck with cattle that did produce more milk, great, but they also needed way more food. They needed high quality food as well, or else they'd stop producing more milk and they were less resistant to the local diseases, so they required more veterinary visits. So it cost them more money, know what I mean? Yeah, we got more milk, but we have to spend more money on maintaining the damn thing. It's not a win. It's not a win in my book. Number 7, old Buffalo Jones. Here we go. A guy named Charles Buffalo Jones. Let's talk about him. This man started breeding animals in 1906 because the bison population in Arizona at the time was exceptionally low. So bison were bred with domestic cattle in order to produce a hardy commercial animal. Nice. Old Buffalo Jones getting his science on. He ended up just giving up on this and released the animals, who were then managed by the state, and the numbers remained relatively low because of limited hunting licenses. Well, when the beefalo, good name, found their way into a national park where hunting is banned and therefore aren't any, natural predators, the population began to grow by 50% a year. That's a lot of beefalo. So none of this is necessarily bad, but it's the animal's environmental impact that has the real trouble. First off, they're very thirsty animals and they can consume 10 gallons each per trip to a watering hole. So they're sucking it all up, you know what I mean? It's like when you're in school and you're waiting for water and the guy in front of you just keeps drinking. You're like, oh my God, what are you doing? Where is this going? Not to mention the fact that they do their dirty business in the water and that basically just ruins it all. Basically, they've thrown the entire ecosystem off balance and have pushed out other animals, and insects and plant life around have also been infected, all because they're thirsty and they like to take big shits where we all drink our water. Thanks, beefalo. Number 6, hybrid lion. Back in the 1980s, at the Chatbir Zoo in Chandigarh, India, they started an experimental program where they would breed together a domestic lion, which is a bit smaller, has a less shaggy mane. They would breed that with an African lion in the hopes that they could be introduced to the wild and help with the dwindling population of wild lions in India. Again, sounds like a great plan at first. How do we make it happen without making weird animals? The zoo found 2 African lions that were being used in a circus and then brought them in to breed with their other 2 Asiatic lions. Nice. Hey, we'll save ya. Just kidding, even worse. When the cubs were born, it was clear this was already a mistake, as the cubs all had severely weak back legs. They were all shaky. They were having extreme trouble walking, and as they got older, their immune system started to fail more and more. Sadly, by 2000, they had bred more than 70 of these hybrid lions, and they finally decided to stop the program, and all the males were given vasectomies in order to stop any reproduction further. There's also laws that prohibited them from killing animals, so they were simply just waiting around for them to die naturally. It's kind of a weird circle we got into. When there's a dwindling population of lions, it's insane to me that they just wasted 20 years trying to do this when they could have just simply bred the lions that they had. Know what I mean? It was right there, and they're like, all right, now let's try something new. It's like, what? No, why? Number 5, Kunga. Perhaps the earliest example of human-animal hybrid testing. Here we go, halfway through, time to turn it up a bit. Scientists recently learned about this donkey hybrid that roamed ancient Mesopotamia. Now this was a time before even horses arrived, so they had to do something, right? Large kungas would pull wagons and smaller ones would help pulling plows. These little guys, they were the talk of the town. Imagine hybrid animals before horses. No wonder they were a status symbol. 4,000 years ago, they were given as gifts for weddings. Yeah, yummy. I wonder what this one is. It smells a little stinky. After so long, scientists are finally able to figure out what exactly a kunga was a hybrid of. It was a female donkey and a male Syrian wild ass. Yeah, just a wild ass over there. Hey, nice wild ass. It's wild what you can still learn from ancient animal bones from even thousands of years ago. It's mind-blowing. More amazing how involved this hybrid was in Mesopotamian culture. Do we bring back the kunga? I don't know. Number 4, super cow. Moo, but with a lot of O's. Just tons of a moo, just a mighty moo. Introducing the super cow. All right, start your day off with some super milk, and then have a super stomach ache, and shit your super pants. Only in Belgium, let's do it. Back in the 1800s, scientists and farmers brought together native cattle and short-horn cattle. After that, they would literally pick the biggest of the bunch and then have them breed together. These cows are officially called Belgian Blues, but I will continue to call them super cows. Thank you very much. I can't even look at these guys. They're disturbing. They look like bodybuilders. That makes no sense. They have like 8 biceps. The Incredible Hulk, just with more milk. Number 3, the mouse with an ear on its back. Oh, I want to Q-tip this guy every time I see him. The mouse with a human ear, folks. How did this happen? This is like the world's greatest mouse spy. Stuart Little's evil brother. Let's do it. Back in 1997, this Vacanti mouse became the test subject to determine if scientists could grow cartilage using chondrocytes, aka cells from a cow. And clearly it worked. A little too well. It's a little odd what we have. We're still talking about it, obviously. It's weird. It all started when Joseph Vacanti, a pediatric surgeon, began designing human organs. This was during a shortage in time. He wasn't just bored and started to make ears. He was changing the medical game. And little did he know, he was about to change the science game as well. He constructed an ear, and he told his brother Chuck and his partner Bob to not bring up the fact that he attached said ear to a live mouse. Kinda hard to bring up, but we'll do our best. Okay. Chuck failed. He spilled the beans almost right away. But now we know that cow cartilage can create human cells. That's great. I want to Q-tip his back. Is that weird? That's not weird. Gives ear cheese a whole new meaning. I'm gonna throw up. Number 2, the zorse. I'll give you a second to figure out what animal this is. Nice, there you go. Male zebra, female horse. Now we've got a really fun word. Zebroids are also quite common historically. Charles Darwin even noted some in his work. So since the 19th century, crossbreeding zebras with horses and donkeys, it's all been done. More often than not, and this is what makes them stand out, zebroids will experience dwarfism. It's pretty cute. In 2010, a zedonk was born, a zebra donkey. All these fun names, right? But again, back in the 70s, 3 were born in Colchester Zoo. These zookeepers were like, how do we make zoos new and hip and bizarre? Oh, I know. Humans are not great. Humans are too bored, it seems. And finally, number 1, Hiromitsu Nakauchi, stem cell biologist from Tokyo. This last one is too wild. Just recently, his experiments have been approved by the government, so things are actively in play here. Not old Farmer Joe in the early 1900s. No, we're getting to modern science now. Hiromitsu hopes to grow human cells inside mice and rats, right? Like we just talked about. But then he wants to transplant those embryos into surrogate animals. A lot of animals, a lot of cells, a lot of traffic going in and out. Cells into rats and mice embryos, how do we even get here? We went from Salem witch trials to rodents being genetically manipulated so they can make pancreases for you. What? But his hope here was that the rodents' bodies will be used for human cells to then make a pancreas for themselves. So it's kind of like a kickoff into biology, right? Here's the thing, while conducting said experiments, they found out that rats were starting to develop a human-type brain. Yeah, that's when they decided to pull the plug, rightfully so. The second humans and animals get too close, governments come in and they go, hey, stop. Thanks. Starting our list off at number 10, Ilya Ivanov. Beginning in the late 1800s, here we go. Soviet biologists, they actually got permission from the country to breed hybrid ape humans. What did you get up to last summer? I'll never tell. She grafted an ovary into a chimp, and the goal was to fertilize Nora, the chimp, with human DNA. So they inseminated a group of chimps. None of them got pregnant, so instead they tried to flip the project up. Now this time, they had a human inseminated with the DNA of chimps. Yeah, the other way around. The volunteer number was low, obviously. Now before anything actually happened, this would have been an absolute train wreck. Before the project was underway, he was sent away to Kazakhstan. So we didn't get any more science projects after that point, thankfully. Yeah, let's just leave monkeys alone. Number 9, human-monkey hybrid. Guys, I wish this was fake, but it's not. So scientists, they're currently trying to make human-monkey hybrids, like the title just said. They have high hopes that these experiments will succeed because monkeys and humans are similar genetically. So obviously, we're gonna try a few times. Spanish biologist Juan Carlos Esbisula Belmonte is working with monkey researchers in China right now to perform these experiments. So basically they're mixing human cells into monkey embryos and then they're just gonna see what happens, I guess. I don't know. Hope it goes well. Their objective is to grow a monkey whose organs are completely made of human cells. Doesn't that sound just terrifying when I say it out loud like that? Then they would use said animals and their organs for people that need them. Yeah, of course this is a little bit controversial in a few ways, so let's just keep moving on. Number 8, Jose Delgado. Okay, we're talking about mind control, so I'll give you a moment to put on your tinfoil hats. You might need those for this one. In the early 1900s, Jose Delgado graduated from the University of Madrid. Even lands a professorship at Yale University, but his mind, the whole time, his mind was focused on others. He had other ideas going on. He was committed to mind control, and his go-to method was implants. Yeah, electrode implants, first used with, you guessed it, primates. Yeah, 3 for 3. Weird. He would use a remote control to make them do certain moves, even, you know, moving on to mind controlling a bull. So he was kind of changing the animal game up as he went. He liked to improvise. He got in the ring with said mind controlled bull, but then oddly enough, the bull was calm. It didn't attack. That's weird. Almost like there's an implant in his brain and he doesn't want to do anything. Reports say he stopped the bull last second before it charged. I call bull. I say there's a thing in his head and he wasn't sure what was up the entire time, little poor lad. And then next in the project line came the people. 25 people were tested on with said mind control device. Yeah, by electronically controlling the brain. He believes armies could be controlled down the road, and until his death in 2011, he was upset that he wasn't cited as often in terms of mind control project in recent studies. Yeah, weird. Guy who mind controlled animals in the 1900s. We're trying not to do that maybe. I don't know. That's why we're not talking about you. Number 7, see-through frogs. Here we go. Just when you thought frogs were already hard to spot, boom, now they're invisible. Good luck catching them. Back in 2016, through artificial insemination, scientists successfully took the DNA of 2 kinds of recessive color frogs, black-eyed frogs and gray-eyed frogs. Then they combined them together to create a frog whose skin is now always translucent. They made an X-Men of a frog. We love it. The see-through factor allows observation of organ growth or cancer formation. That's the human science thing. And it kind of helps when you can see the problem, I guess. No dissection needed for further study. Right? Just looking through you. That's pretty intrusive. I don't know. Imagine being see-through all the time. Like, hey pal, my eyes are up here. Quit staring at my pancreas. Number 6, Tigons. Let Tigons be bygones. Let's never do this ever, please. I was gonna say liger, but that's been used before. We all know what that one looks like. Tigons were a real hybrid animal that you could see for yourself at both the London Zoo and the Manchester Zoo at one point in history. This was of course back in the late 30s, where folks didn't bat an eye towards these kind of projects or these kind of things. Yeah, step on up and see the Tigon. A tiger head and a lion body, and a tiger tail, all together to make a big old pile of holy. Yeah, that's what happens when you put animals in the same cage. Sometimes they get along a little too well. Tigon hybrids were seen long before the 90s as well. In 1837, for example, Queen Victoria was gifted a Tigon. That's odd. They're like flowers or a hybrid creature. What do we give the Queen? Number 5. DIY. Not sure how many times I have to say this in life, but don't try any crossbreeding at home, or ever for that matter. Thanks. Keep it up. Because things obviously go south. For example, back in 2010, a woman named Julie Leroy, she was working as an animal control officer when an owner of a pit bull puppy said she didn't want to keep her. Okay, this happens often, but when Julie saw the dog, she was in complete disbelief. She was like, yeah, I'll take this living animal. I'm not a monster. I can commit to this for sure, thanks. People who abandon animals also, you're the devil. Don't do that. This dog, it was a hybrid animal. It wasn't healthy, but all the more reasons why you should stick around. The dog had a squished up body, a huge jaw, and a bad underbite, and it was oddly shaped. But you gotta love him still. Look, he's so cute. God, I want him. Little bread dude. That's because the dog suffered from short spine syndrome. That's because they got the dog from a backyard breeding place who was carelessly breeding a bunch of these dogs together. Just no effort at all, no care. Thankfully, Julie did bring the dog home and gave her a loving time. Sweet little thing. Olivia and I want a dog so badly. I would definitely take this little hybrid lady in a heartbeat, for sure. A little bread bed for her. Oh, I love dogs, even if they're, you know, hybrid and created in a backyard. Number 4, glowfish. I never had a fish tank growing up. I don't know, not sure how I felt about a starfish just watching me sleep for hours on end. Back in 2012, Yorktown Technologies created hybrid glowfish. They were first created from zebrafish, but now there's a whole plethora of glowfish that you can purchase. Tiger barbs, rainbow sharks, you name it, everything's glowy now. I guess to hype up Avatar 2, I don't know. I don't see why we needed hybrid glowfish. Why are we doing this? Can we stop? Bioluminescence is natural. We see octopus or deep sea fish that have it naturally. Scientists in Singapore were originally aiming to modify fish to spot toxins in polluted water in an easier way. Cool. But on one hand, you're like, oh, these fish are pretty beautiful. They're glowy. Can I have one, please? Alan Blake, co-founder of said Yorktown Technologies, wanted them to glow only when near toxins. Now, this was back in 2003 when they first started. Guy wanted real-life notifications in the water. Cool. Today, we're at a point where glowfish are just being sold to houses for reasons. Just because. Do you want a glowfish? I don't know. Am I the only one that's like out of the loop with like the glowy fish vibe? Comment down below if a glowfish is something you want or now want. Oops, sorry. Number 3, Savannah cats. This one's been talked about for a while now. How do we feel about Savannah cats? I want to hear about this one as well. In May 2012, the International Cat Association registered this Savannah cat as a new breed. It's official, we got a new cat. Just what the world needs. More cats. I'm allergic, so, you know. Pardon my beef. The international cat community confirms it. Now, it all started in the late 80s when Judy Frank crossbred a male several with a domestic Siamese. The offspring, in turn, was appropriately named Savannah. Yeah, now we have cats with big ass ears, and they're so cute. I can't help it, they are so cute. Domestic cats mixed with wild African cats. I mean, it sounds like you're gonna get a cat. I don't know how to tell you. This is like a science experiment that they're like, oh, it worked. And apparently they're great. Apparently they're not too crazy temper-wise, but they're fun and they're energetic. Great for families. Who knew? Better than glowfish. Any day. Any day. Number 2, pig human. Scientists at the Salk Institute for Biological Scientists, what a mouthful that was, have created a human-pig hybrid. Yeah, in 2017, when worlds collide, let's do it. An embryo was placed in an adult pig for 4 weeks, and then when it was taken out and further analyzed, the embryos, not only one survived, but they also contained some human cells. So their hope now was to grow human organs inside of pigs, instead of, you know, waiting for a donor. Impatient, but okay, we're listening. In 1910, zoologists figured out that it might even be possible to create hybrids between humans and their closest relatives as well. Yeah, no matter how this ends, either Planet of the Apes or Planet of the Pigs, I did my part, okay? I recycled. I didn't f with animal DNA, like Jurassic Park. I just kinda got a job. I don't know. Hands are clean. And finally, number 1, Stubbins Firth. We saved Firth for first. Let's do it. This is one of the craziest science projects I've ever heard of, so buckle up. Stubbins Firth, a researcher from Pennsylvania back in the late 1700s. First of all, as you could probably guess, methods back in the 1700s were often messy and pretty much illegal in every way. Firth was a doctor in training at the time, and he decided to prove to the world that yellow fever was not contagious. Yeah, imagine if you had Twitter. Firth would surgically insert vomit from his patients with yellow fever. He would insert vomit into his body. He would insert all their yuck into his wounds, all over his face, his eyes, you name it. He was trying to get it. He was going the extra, I'm gonna throw up. He was going the extra mile, all in the name of medical research. Even urine and saliva too. Anything yucky, he was rubbing it in. Firth, to all of our surprise, did not get sick. He was proud of that one. He told everybody the news loudly. He mansplained it at like 4 a.m. We look back now though and we realize Firth just sampled late stage patients, so they were further along. Much further, say, than the contagious period. So basically he volunteered to dump all the on his Yeah, science. History is gross. Science as well. Gets a little messy sometimes.